Secretary Rubio, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Since becoming Secretary of State, you really have made some big changes here. You kind of pared things back at the State Department. You've restructured some things here. And you actually say that this was long overdue. So tell me about the changes you've made and why you felt like they were so important.
Well, the important thing to know is that we reorganized the boxes, in our org chart in terms of how the State Department functions. This wasn't an effort to go in and get rid of people. It was an effort to reorganize. And now, if you get rid of a bureau you're not going to use anymore, obviously you don't need those positions anymore. And it was very small. I mean, it was 1,300 people out of 70 or 50 or 60,000. I read these reports about how we've gutted American diplomacy. It's really silly. But here's the fundamental nature of it. It took too long to get things done. We had too many bureaus, too many offices. They were unaligned with each other. I get these decision memos. And these decision memos have to be cleared by these different desks, these different offices. Some of them had 30 or 40 boxes. 30 or 40 people had to clear it before it even got to me. And that's why it takes the State Department so long to function. So what we're changing on that is, people can certainly give their opinion. If they don't agree with the decision or they have concerns about it, that can be noted. But ultimately, I need to get that decision memo to my desk so we can take action. We can't wait 6 weeks, 6 months to do things. It renders us irrelevant, especially in a world that moves so fast.
Let me ask you about Russia. The president gave Russia 50 days to strike a peace deal or face possibly 100% tariffs. Where do you think Putin is on this? Do you think this is an effective strategy, and what do you expect to see happen?
First of all, I think everybody should be very happy that the American president, the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is focused on peace. There's nothing he wants more than to be a part of peace agreements, stopping wars, preventing wars, ending wars. It's not his war. He didn't start this war. It didn't happen. It never would have happened had he been president, but it did. He inherits it, and he's done everything possible to bring it to an end. I think he's growing increasingly frustrated that despite having very good interactions with Vladimir Putin and phone calls, it never leads to anything. So the time has come for some action here, and I think the president has made that abundantly clear. He's losing his patience. He's losing his willingness to continue to wait for the Russian side to do something here to bring an end to this war that wasn't his war, but he wants to see it come to an end. Since January of this year, over 100,000 Russian soldiers, just on the Russian side, have been killed. It's a bloody conflict with a lot of death and destruction. A lot of this engagement has been really about playing for time and sort of delay tactics to make it look like they're interested in peace, but not really serious about it. He's not going to fall into that trap of being, pulled into endless talks about talks. And I think he picks up a lot of that from his just understanding of human nature and human behavior, having dealt with some of the most cutthroat people in business for 40, 50 years.
The negotiator in chief.
Yeah, he enjoys that part of the job, by the way.
He does.
He does. He enjoys that part of the job. And I think it's very useful for us because ultimately we know we have the ultimate closer in the administration with our president. And our job is to put these deals together, bring them usually to the 95% range of agreement, and then he comes in at the end and closes it. And whether that's on trade or hopefully on peace, that's the role he's played. And it's a very powerful role. That last 5%, those last few yards are always the hardest one in any negotiation.
Well, so many people talk about the fact that China is conspiring with Russia and Iran. How does the U.S. deal with that and a potential alliance between those three?
Everybody knows, it's not a secret, that China is giving Russia as much aid as they can get away with without being discovered. The Europeans have caught on to this. There's no way that Putin could have sustained this war without Chinese support, particularly buying his oil. And I think the Chinese have an incentive to see this war go on. They think that the longer this war goes on, it'll distract us and prevent us from focusing on other parts of the world that they're interested in. With Iran, the Chinese also buy a lot of their sanctioned oil and have provided them some defense articles in the past. I think everyone, China, Russia, others, even North Korea, have become a little bit more cautious about supporting Iran, especially after our B-2s flew halfway around the world and conducted an operation and left before anyone found out about it. So I think that what's happened now is a lot of these countries are being, in the middle of that war when Iran turned to Russia, turned to China, turned to some of their proxies, they all kind of took a pass and said, we don't want to get involved in this thing. It sort of reminded the world that we have a strong president and the most extraordinary military capabilities in the world. No one has the things we have in our defense, whether it's our airplanes, our missiles, our bombs that we use, and our guided munitions. A lot of people have forgotten that. President Trump reminded him.
You also recently met with the Chinese foreign minister. Do you feel like there are still areas where we could see cooperation between the U.S. and China? And what came out of that meeting overall?
Yeah, look, the United States and China are the two most powerful and important countries in the world. So we have to have relations. We have to be able to talk to them. And we have to, if possible, find areas of cooperation. We're going to have some irritants. There's no doubt about it. I think just talking about the trade perspective, just understand, everybody should understand this. For 30 years, the Chinese have basically carried out this economic scheme or operation where they could sell anything they want into the United States. Every Chinese company, unfettered access to the U.S. market, the most important consumer market in the world. But the Chinese market's completely closed. So their market is closed and their companies are protected inside of China, but then they want the right to be able to sell us anything they want and export anything they want. And it's not just been going on for a year or 2 years, it's been going on for 3 decades. President Trump's been talking about this for 20 years. This is not some new thing he discovered the day after he was sworn in. He's been talking about this forever. So all he's saying is, I don't understand it. They get to do whatever they want here. We get to do nothing over there. How is that fair? I'm going to rebalance it. But I think we have to be able to do that and at the same time understand that there are things we have to be able to interact with the Chinese on just to avoid misunderstandings. So we have to have relations with them. We want to have respectful relations with them. And in those areas where we have disagreement, we always have to stand on the American side of the issue.
You know, we used to see hostages kind of used as a bargaining chip. You don't really see that anymore, not under this president. So tell me about this 3-country prisoner swap that involved El Salvador and Venezuela with the United States.
Yeah, well, let's start with who was in El Salvador. Who was in El Salvador were about 250 members of Tren de Aragua, which is a designated terrorist organization. It's a street gang from Venezuela. Normally, you would take them and deport them back to their home country. The problem is Venezuela was using that as a weapon against us. They were saying, okay, we will do that. We will only take deportees if you give us this concession or that concession. When Joe Biden was president, he made a deal with the Venezuelans on deportations, and in exchange, 2 convicted drug dealers, who happened to be the nephews of Nicolas Maduro, were returned. His bag man, his money man, his henchman, the guy that collected all his money from around the world, was also indicted, was in a prison in the United States. He was released. They gave him all these concessions. In the case of President Trump, he says, I'm not giving you any concessions. So since Venezuela wouldn't take them, we sent them to El Salvador, who housed them in their prisons. Now, an opportunity presented itself for those people to be sent, those criminals, those gang members, to be sent back to where they belong, which is in Venezuela. That's where they came from. Maduro, who's not even the president of Venezuela, he's a narco-trafficking leader. He is an indicted drug dealer by the Southern District of New York in the United States, and he desperately wants us to take that indictment off of him. That's what he wants. He's not going to get that, and he didn't get that. And that's a big difference from what you saw in the past. If we had done that, within 5 days, you would have seen 10 more Americans arrested, because that's what all these countries around the world are doing. They arrest Americans knowing that they can use them as bargaining chips, but not with this administration.
What about the hostages held by Hamas? You know, there's been some success movement there. Do you feel like there could be more on that front?
Yeah, the good news is every American is out now. We care about all the hostages. And there's a very simple solution to what's happening in Gaza. Release all the hostages, lay down your arms, and the war ends for Hamas. I'm going to agree to that, obviously. So Steve Witkoff, who's amazing, has been working on that day and night for weeks. And they've made a lot of progress, and they're close. But we're optimistic and hopeful that any day now we will have a ceasefire agreement where at least half the hostages, including the deceased, will be released. And at the end of that 60-day period, the remaining hostages would be released. I think Steve's doing a phenomenal job with that, and hopefully we'll have good news to report on that as soon as possible.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.